Canto Valley is a weird place. Whether it's the white mold that tries to infect the trees in the town, something that even my father fears, or the bear that everyone knows isn't a bear, which prowls the woods at night, or how the actions of the domesticated animals can change to violence if not properly cared for, Canto Valley is known for its strangeness. Similar to how people view nature, we don't take the weird or even dangerous things that come out of the valley personally. Animals are just animals. Nature is just nature. The rain falls on both the righteous and the wicked. It would be like taking it as a personal attack when the clouds dropped hail and dented your car. That's how I was raised to view the valley, and how I took it as well. Until that radio broadcast. That I took personally. In the woods of the valley reside many strange things, most of which defy reason. The abandoned logging camp in the middle of the woods, with its rusted machinery occasionally turning on when no one is around, is not even close to being the strangest. And one of these reason-defying things was the Deepwood radio station. A radio station we could only pick up when we were actually inside the woods, one that often changed which channel it would be broadcast from. It might have been one of the few parts of the valley us kids knew about that the adults did not. We've never heard our parents talk about it, and only found it on accident when Javi had been messing around with an old box radio, one he had taken with us when we had been playing at the logging camp. At the beginning, it was a fun secret we could keep amongst ourselves. It was fun because the Deepwood radio station normally played good music, giving us something to listen to since no other radio stations could be heard in the woods, and none of us were willing to risk bringing our precious CD players with us during our adventures. And the radio hosts, when introducing or promoting the station, always seemed so funny, making us double over with laughter, though nowadays their comments seem so corny and childish. Yet, like so much in the valley, the good always came with the bad. The Deepwood radio hosts, instead of playing commercials or ads in between the songs, would sporadically, and usually briefly, say something personal. Not personal about themselves, personal about us. Some of these comments were innocuous, though odd, such as asking if us kids, the hosts often mentioned "you kids" when making these addresses, if we had finished our homework before playing, or brushed our teeth before going to bed. Other comments were disquieting, telling us to have fun playing at the logging camp, or to wash our hands after visiting the old RV stuck in the woods, or to be safe when searching for the tracks of that thing in the woods we call a bear, whose monstrous roar could wake us up in the middle of the night. Deepwood Radio was letting us know that they knew where we were. But worst of all was when they would refer to us by name. How they knew who we were is disturbing enough, but when they called us by name, they never had anything nice to say. They would ask if Javi was tired of playing second fiddle to my brother, or ask if Jerry still cried himself to sleep after he had been lost in the woods one night, and talk about the jealousy I felt for my friend Elise when comparing her more feminine charm against my boyish tomboy appearance. It says a lot about the loyalty of our friendship that, whenever the radio hosts would say such personal things, none of us would treat what they said as fact, or hold it against one another, even if what they said about me was true. I can't tell you the number of times we tried to venture deep into the woods to find the source of the radio station. We tried climbing tall trees to look for a sign of the tower, and tried using the antenna of the radio to see what direction the signal was strongest. We never could find it, its location yet another mystery of the valley. Though one day the uncomfortable, though nearly harmless nature of the Deepwood radio station changed for all of us. It was a Saturday afternoon, and we had all sat down to catch our collective breaths after treating the abandoned logging camp as some massive obstacle course. The song we had been enjoying came to an abrupt stop halfway through, the radio going silent, save for the sound of someone quietly laughing. When we all leaned forward to listen, the laughter ended, and the host spoke to us in a raspy voice, naming each of us one by one. And what they said about my friends, I will never repeat. Calling their words vile would be like referring to sewage as drinking water. It doesn't come close to describing how disgusting it was. If you want a glimpse, though, I'll let you know what they said to my brother and I. We had all been too stunned by the hideous words of the host to think to turn off the radio. So, when the host called my brother and I by name, my heart sank into my stomach, and I lost the power to move. The host said, with a sneer, that they had a message for us. From our mother. And their voice was replaced by a woman, screaming in pain as she burned. I can still hear it, even now. The agony in her cries, the sizzle of her skin. I can even smell it when it comes to memory. The smell of burnt flesh, the acrid scent of burning hair. Her scream was so loud it filled the clearing, filtered into the woods, rang in my ears, ate away at my soul. I don't know how Ethan found the strength, but he reached over and turned the radio off so hard he nearly broke it, even though he had been paralyzed when the host had degraded him minutes before. The silence that followed lasted only a few moments before I began to fill it with my loud sobs, falling into my brother's arms. He must have been in pain too, and even though he's just barely older than me, he held me close and told me everything was all right. No matter how much of a tomboy I was, I sobbed like a little girl that afternoon. The next day, at church, my father sat between my brother and I and kept us close. He didn't know what had happened, but I think he sensed that something was wrong and had moved to instinctively protect us. Sitting in that pew, with my father's arm over my shoulder, I did something for the first time. I took it personally. I clasped my hands, bowed my head, and silently prayed. I hate to admit it, but I have to be honest. It wasn't what you would call a righteous prayer. I prayed that everyone at that radio station would be struck with divine punishment for even daring to besmirch the memory of my mother. In that moment, I wanted them to hurt even more than they had made me hurt. I wanted them to suffer. It felt so wrong asking such a thing that I immediately regretted praying it. Letting the taunting humiliation of the radio station follow me out of the woods and home would solve nothing. I would just never listen to the radio station again, just as we had all agreed the day before. I would put it out of my mind and move on with a smile, just as I had when my mother had died. And that could have been the last time we heard from Deepwood radio station. But it wasn't. It was the following afternoon that I heard the radio tower's last broadcast. We went back to the abandoned logging camp to play, determined to not let the words of the radio host ruin one of our fun hangouts. Elise came with us that time, having finished her chores early, and as we all began to play, Elise walked over to the silent radio and reached to turn it on. She hadn't been there on Saturday. She hadn't endured the abusive invectives that had been hurled at us, and we, Following our pattern of not bringing up anything personal the radio station said about us, had failed to tell her why we had kept the radio turned off. We yelled at her to not touch it, but our sudden shout startled her, and Elise not only turned the knob on, but accidentally cranked the volume as high as it would go. And from that radio came screaming. But not the screaming of my mother. Instead, it was the terrified screams and panicked shouts of the radio hosts. As loud as the volume on the radio was, neither of the hosts seemed to be close to their microphones, so much of what they said was distorted or muffled, but some of it we could make out. Phrases like, "Bar the door," and "Why is this happening?" followed by, it's coming," and then the whimpered cry of, "Someone, help." As we stared at the radio in shock, there was a loud boom that came out of its speakers. The sound of a door bursting open, and then a roar. A monstrous roar, one that would sometimes wake us up in the middle of the night. The roar of that thing we call a bear. That roar didn't quite drown out the sounds of the host's screams, their wails of agony, the sounds of meat being torn, bones being snapped, and blood being spilled. This time, my brother moved first, and with a swift kick, he sent the radio flying across the clearing and into the side of a tree, where it fell to the dirt, silent as the grave. The following Friday, when I stayed over at Elisa's house for a sleepover, I finally told her what we had heard on the radio. I thought I had gotten over it at that point, but she hugged me, and I began crying once again. I really am jealous of how feminine she is compared to me, but I love how comforting she is. So, like the adults of Canto Valley, I tend not to take anything that comes out of the woods personally, even if I have to fight the urge to do so. After all, I don't think what happened to Deepwood's radio station was divine punishment. It wasn't a good prayer, and I don't think that thing we call a bear would ever answer God's call. So, I can't run the risk that, if I take something personally and utter some unholy desire of my heart, something else will hear my words and act on them. We still played in the abandoned logging camp. We were some pretty stubborn kids. Obviously, we never brought another radio into the woods after that, and threw the broken radio my brother had kicked into a ditch just outside the camp like the garbage it was. But every now and then, as we would play, I swear I would hear static coming from that ditch. Some muffled screams, and wails of pain, and a monstrous roar.